Boom, boom, in the room, mic check. What's up, guys? Before we start this Restaurant Fiction episode, I need your help. I need a huge favor. For all of the fans or occasional listeners of Restaurant Fiction, even if you just want to listen for 1 minute, maybe 1 second, please rate and review us on iTunes. That's the main way how we continue to have these amazing guests and provide you with awesome content. Thank you. Faden? Cut to.
Exterior. Interior.
Restaurant?
Bar. Club.
Day.
Night.
Action! What is going on, guys? This is the Restaurant Fiction Podcast, the podcast that reviews fictional restaurants, bars, and clubs featured in TV and film, as well as provide key insight on the screenwriting process. I'm your host, Monis Rose. This episode's guest is a little different than the huge. We're changing it up. Instead of having a screenwriter, director, or producer come on board, we have an established journalist who is well-versed in the Los Angeles food scene. Jeff Miller is that man. He's the host of the Travel Channel show Trip Testers, former editor of the Los Angeles edition of Thrillist, captain of the cover band Black Crystal Wolf Kids, and aficionado of Jackrabbit Slims, a restaurant prominently featured in the Quentin Tarantino film Pulp Fiction. Jeff enlightens us on why Jackrabbit Slims and 1950s diners in LA are iconic, and he discusses the difference between a Yelp reviewer, a TripAdvisor reviewer, and a scholarly food critic. Last but not least, among the many fantastic restaurants Jeff has eaten at and wrote about, he tells us about his worst restaurant, a place he would probably give a 0-star Yelp review to. Without any further ado, here's the review of Jackrabbit Slims and my chit-chat with Jeff. Guys, Jackrabbit Slims is in Glendale, California. It isn't a place that you walk into by accident either. Once you go in, and it is an intentional decision to go into this place, you are warped into a 1950s diner. Now, why do I mean it is an intentional decision? Because there is a gigantic rabbit neon sign in front. It is blasting all hours of the day, especially at night, much brighter than a full moon. So once inside, you are warped into the 1950s, but not just any part of the 1950s. You are transported into a 1950s multi-camera sitcom. The restaurant, the interior design is like different sets. One set features pleather sofas, a cobblestone fireplace, and a flashy wet bar. Another set features metal umbrellas and picnic tables on AstroTurf. The best seats in the house are the drive-in movie theater section with 6 stripped classic cars. Yes, definitely have your makeout session in one of these cars. Patrons inside say Jackrabbit Slims is a wax museum with a pulse. The waiters, waitresses, busboys, barbacks, bartenders, they dress and act like characters one would find outside the Grauman Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. The only difference is these actors, if you will, these characters inside Jackrabbit Slims are really doing some method work that the casting, the audition process is probably extensive. They are truly, truly deserving of some type of Oscar, if you will. Tourists like to be waited on. The favorites, I guess, are Marilyn Monroe, Elvis, and Buddy Holly. But when Restaurant Fiction came in, we loved being waited on Hilda, and that's a character that was a notorious 1950s pinup girl who actually rivaled Marilyn Monroe. Yes, wanted to give her some competition. So a stage, whether that be like some sort of dance-off stage, is smack dab in the middle of this restaurant where employees and also patrons have some kind of dance-offs. Tuesday nights is Young Elvis night, and Wednesdays is Chubby Checkers. we don't advertise any really events at any said particular restaurant, but when we always went, this was a much better entertainment experience than some rock band. So the menu matches the restaurant's kitsch. What you would have the 1950s fare with these cutesy names, but the real standout, the really only thing to write about is the $5 shake. It was used with Fosselman's ice cream, which is a 90-year-old mom and pop ice cream parlor in the San Gabriel Valley, and usually these shakes are married with half and half, homemade syrups, fudges, and ganaches. The most popular, the fan favorite, the one written on TripAdvisor, is the Amos and Andy. But we really think the Chuck Berry is the real gem. It is strawberry ice cream, blackberries, chocolate chips, and vanilla spiced with whipped cream, all garnished with an American flag on top. Sure beats the cherry. So, what am I trying to say? What is Restaurant Fiction trying to say? Jackrabbit Slim's isn't a place you'd go to on a regular basis, but if you have an out-of-town guest or a first hot date, it doesn't get more Hollywood than this. All right, so Jeff, what did you think of Jackrabbit Slim's? Restaurant Fiction listeners, please advise that we had technical difficulties for this interview, so we had to do it via the phone. That is why there is some static and fuzziness, and it is not as clear as we would like. And rest assured, the quality of the material is still there and will always be there. Enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, Pulp Fiction is one of my favorite movies ever made, easily top 5. I don't think that anybody intended on Jackrabbit Slim's having the best burger in Los Angeles, but having, maybe the best vibe of any restaurant, or the most fun vibe. It's one of the things that Tarantino is so good at, is creating that sort of evocative tone in his movies. And I think that Jackrabbit Slim's, it brings up, sort of the places, like you said, Mel's Diner, Cafe 50s, which is a California chain, but it's all of that to the nth degree. It's as over the top as it possibly could be. I remember Buddy Holly is walking around and, make references to Buddy Holly's song. I mean, it's very specifically about the personalities there.
We did not experience that great of food, but what are you ordering and drinking at Jackrabbit Slim's?
I mean, you're not going there on a diet. Jackrabbit Slim's is a place where you order, a double cheeseburger and a milkshake, an Oreo malted milkshake and fries and onion rings. I mean, I feel like Jackrabbit Slim's is the kind of place that you really do go to for nostalgia, and it's not just nostalgia for those personalities like we discussed, nostalgia for that childhood food, for that innocent comfort food, for lack of a better word. You're going to be ordering the thing that makes you feel like maybe you're never going to eat again after you leave.
How would you go about reviewing a fictional restaurant?
I mean, I think the most important thing is to sort of dig into what the intent of the restaurant on screen is, to look at what the people in the scene ordered and maybe why in the story of the movie. And I think that it's sort of less about would the food taste good here or would the service be good here, and more about what makes this work for the setting and for the movie that it's taking place in. For instance, another one that I thought of after we discussed Jackrabbit Slim's is The Diner in The Big Lebowski. And that's my number one favorite movie of all time. And key moment in that movie where John Goodman's character, Walter, is drinking a coffee. They're having this discussion in the diner. They have this interaction with the waitress. I don't even remember if there's food in that scene, even though I've seen that movie 100 times. But the coffee is integral to that scene. You can taste the coffee as it's in John Goodman's hand, because we've all had terrible diner coffee before. And that's all it is. That's what that scene is about, is the coffee, that we've all been there before. And I think it's just really important for those sorts of scenes, and Jackrabbit Slim certainly falls in this category, to be evocative, whether it's about the food or not.
I think food is important because you not just have Jackrabbit Slim's, but the entire movie. It starts out with the scene in the diner, and then it ends with the big shootout, which is the same diner. But anyway, you have pretty much 2 food locations in this movie.
Sure. And on top of that, I mean, it has one of the most famous conversations about food in film, where they're talking about what do you call a quarter pounder in, I'm trying to remember where it is. I'm drawing a blank. What's a quarter? Oh, in France. A quarter pounder called in France. What's a Big Mac called in France? That's one of the most iconic scenes in that movie as well. And then, of course, he comes in for the scene with the drug deal with the Big Kahuna Burger, modeled after In-N-Out in Los Angeles. I mean, food really does play a part in that movie, especially burgers. Now that we're talking about it, I've never thought about it before, but there's a burger motif through Pulp Fiction.
Was it about the Big Lebowski that made it pop? What made it pop to you about Jackrabbit Slims? Or even when you go to a future movie that has a restaurant, what makes it pop out to you?
Well, I mean, I think that it's the idea that this place could exist in real life. I mean, Jackrabbit Slims, again, is a really great example because you could see somebody starting that chain and having that chain or just that individual restaurant be a successful restaurant, a place that, as you said, people would go to, especially tourists if there was only one of them, because it's so committed to the theme. In The Big Lebowski, the diner feels like a real diner. The waitress feels like a waitress we've all had. There's other places, like in another place that stands out to me is the Peach Pit from Beverly Hills 90210. When I was a kid and watching that show, that just seemed like, I can't wait till I'm a teenager and I have a place like the Peach Pit where me and my friends can hang out and everybody knows us. It's not just somewhere that's real. It's somewhere that feels evocative, like I keep saying it, in some way or another.
What kind of restaurant has not been seen in, say, TV or a movie that you would like to see?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I mean, I feel like there is this idea still that New York's food scene is better than Los Angeles's, and there's so many great types of restaurant in LA that you just don't get the same level in New York. Like our sushi restaurants, I think, are better than anything in New York, and our Chinese restaurants in the San Gabriel Valley certainly go head to head against anything in New York. So, setting a Los Angeles movie with some of those sort of iconic foodie locations, San Gabriel Valley, San Fernando Valley for sushi, these places that feel more like what people in LA actually eat than sort of the fancier places that people think people in LA eat, I think would be great.
LA has a sprawling Koreatown. The one in New York is incredibly small with lackluster options.
Yes, totally agree. Let's do a movie about Korean barbecue. I'm in. Sign me up. The catering would be the best ever.
Oh, now, wait. So Korean barbecue, is it going to be just like a mom and pop place over 40-year-old, or is it going to be like one of those hipster Korean barbecues that play EDM even at 10 a.m. in the morning?
Right. There was that movie that was the movie about the Indian restaurants that open across the street from the French restaurant, the 100-Foot Journey. I feel like it would be like that. It's like one Korean restaurant that's been owned by the Koreans their whole life, and then the hipster Korean restaurant that's like the new young Koreans. And, the old guard hates the new guard. The new guard's getting the people that come in, but the old guard has their people. And then, of course, one of the people, like the granddaughter of the old guard people, falls in love with the chef at the new guard place. That's where the conflict in the movie comes from.
What do you love about writing about a restaurant or bar?
So my favorite thing is probably exposing people to a place that they wouldn't otherwise find. I've been really, really lucky. I've been writing about food in LA for over 10 years now. And there have been a number of sort of discovery moments where I've eaten somewhere and really thought, people should know about this place, and then been able to write about it, more than once and make a difference for generally small businesses, places that I think people think of successful restaurants as being money makers, but a lot of the time they're not there, or it takes them a long time to get to the point where they are. To know that I played at least a small part in some of the places in LA that have been successful, getting people through the door their first time, is really the thing about the job that has made me the most proud. And that's, to me, the most exciting thing is going somewhere, eating something and saying, man, I would love for this place to be full.
That's magical, actually. I mean, do you have a specific time of when your voice really gave a restaurant a boost like that?
I mean, I would hate to give myself, full credit for anything, but the one that comes to mind is this place in LA called Baroo, Baroo. And the first time I went there, my friend Zach Brooks took me there, who is also a food writer. He runs a website called Midtown Lunch, and he used to be on a podcast with me called Food is the New Rock. And he took me there, so I can't take all the credit. He discovered it first. And not only did he discover it first, he heard about it from another fellow food writer, Besha Rodell, who at that time was the food writer for LA Weekly. But we went to this place and it was empty, and it's an unlabeled place run by these two chefs who used to work in high-end dining, but it's a mid-range counter service restaurant serving up some of the most unusual food you've ever eaten, and it's insanely delicious. My mouth is watering thinking about it.
Wait, what is it called again for our viewers?
It's called Baroo, Baroo, Baroo.
It is, I believe it's if you're in the Hollywood area, it's like on Santa Monica in Normandy. Am I right?
Yeah, it's in a really weird location. It's like one of those places that you would drive by if you didn't know it existed. It's next to a 7-Eleven in a mini mall. It's unlabeled. And it's legitimately some of the most delicious food I've ever had in my life. The first person to write about it publicly, I think, was Besha. I think she sort of beat me to the punch. But Besha wrote about it. We wrote about it either that same day or Thrillist publication overall. Just kept writing about it. It was one of our best restaurants of the year that year. We interviewed the chefs. And eventually I went back into the restaurant and ordered food. And the other chef came out and just thanked me profusely. And I didn't even know that they knew who I was. There was none of me trying to get anything for free or trying to, say like, hey, I helped you out. But they had done their research or seen me somewhere. And they thanked me so profusely for bringing people in and kept telling me that people had heard about it on Thrillist. It was really gratifying because that is specifically what I'm talking about. It's a small business owned by these two guys who had a dream. They've become very acclaimed in the food world. They were one of Bon Appetit's best new restaurants the year they opened as well. So I've played a very, very small part in that. It's something that I feel very proud of.
Excellent. All right, so what do actual food critics do to elevate the profession when everyone now is a critic via, like, example, Yelp?
Yeah, I think Yelp, there's a time and a place for Yelp. When I go to a new city or I need to find something really close to me, I think everybody really uses Yelp. But the problem with Yelp is that there's no sort of there's no editor. And so that means that somebody who couldn't find parking and gives a place 0 stars holds the same credibility as somebody who, really knows food, went in and had an amazing meal and gave it 5 stars. It's like a sort of a fool's game because there's a different credibility to both of them. It is hard to stand out these days, I think, more than it was maybe 20 years ago, because 20 years ago, there was much more of a barrier to entry. Not anybody could just publish what their thoughts were about somewhere. And that's both a good and a bad thing. I think that there's definitely something to be said for the wisdom of the crowd, and definitely something to be said for, the idea of a tastemaker, for lack of a better word, somebody who spends their time thinking about whether it's food or music or film or whatever, being a critic or being a writer in that world and really knowing the personalities and getting into the reasons why something exists rather than just the fact that it does.
How do you consistently stay creative and not plateau? But maybe more, whether it be, review after review after review versus song after song after song.
I think it's a big challenge for anybody who's creative. You don't want to just repeat the same thing over and over again. At the Thrillist, we had a daily deadline. I was publishing at least one thing a day. I wasn't writing all of them, but I was either editing or writing, every story. And so part of it is like a job. You just know that it has to get done. It's a little more difficult for me when I don't have a deadline behind me to, do that consistent creativity. I've recently started writing songs on a deadline, and that's been a really, really good exercise for me as well because, again, without the deadline, it just doesn't get done sometimes. So my main thing is like keeping a really good calendar and sticking to deadlines, even if they're deadlines that are self-imposed. It makes it, for me, easier to generate creativity and to get over writer's block when, I feel like somebody's going to be let down if I don't deliver on time. But it can be really tricky. And I think one of the hardest things about being a creative person is that moment where you think, this is going to be the last time. I'm never going to be able to write again. I'm never going to be able to make music again. I hate what I'm doing. And then hopefully you break through that at some point in time.
How does a journalist keep the restaurant review fresh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've never really considered myself a restaurant reviewer. I've certainly written about a lot of restaurants, but I've never really written the sort of long form reviews. I'm more of like a food writer. And there's it's a very gray line. I understand, if you're looking at it from a sort of consumer perspective. I think one of my favorite things is humor in reviews and wordplay. You know, we have like sort of a national hero in Los Angeles, Jonathan Gold, who is one of the best restaurant reviewers and restaurant writers in the country. His reviews are full of so much great wordplay and so much personality. You know, it takes years and years and years of practice to do that, but that's how you keep it fresh, is by putting some of yourself in everything that you're writing, and sort of experimenting with form too. You know, not everything needs to be, and then this dish arrived, and then this dish arrived, and then this dish arrived. You can approach it from, you know, sort of metaphoric perspective, take sort of a different approach, a more fun approach to a review.
You're a musician as well?
Yeah. My band's called Black Crystal Wolf Kids. It's the world's first and only indie rock tribute band. So it's like sort of like, imagine like Coachella the tribute. We wear costumes on stage, and every song is a sing along, and it's like taking all of the pretentiousness out of indie rock. It's super fun.
Oh, it's fantastic. Oh man, I wish this was a podcast about music and rock and roll. I'd love to talk about that, but
I could talk about it for hours. It's super fun.
How important is the music to the ambiance of a restaurant?
So I've become very close friends with this guy, Andrew Whitner, who programs music for restaurants. And before he and I were friends, it was something I rarely thought about. And now it's something I think about every time I'm in a restaurant. There are moments where I'm sitting in a restaurant and they're playing some bad EDM song, but the restaurant is like this beautiful brick, you know, sort of retro looking restaurant. And I think to myself, what are they thinking? Why are they letting somebody just put a playlist on this is going to turn people away? And I think that music is really, really important to setting the mood of a restaurant. Even in its background noise, it's the kind of thing that the vibe that people are going to be experiencing there is so important to the music. Just think about it. Let's say you had a beach-themed restaurant, right? And it was tiki torches and, you know, straw huts and margaritas and burgers. But the music that was playing was heavy metal. It would not work. You want to be hearing Jack Johnson. You want to be hearing reggae. So my friend programs the music now for Sugarfish. And when we first started going to Sugarfish, he and I, we'd go there and he would complain to me about the music because the music was, you know, a amalgam of bad 90s rock. For no reason. You know, it was like Third Eye Blind and like not even Dashboard Confessional, like Third Eye Blind and like Fuel. And he would he'd just be like, why is this playing here? And the music that he's programmed for it is much more like indie pop. And it fits the mood of that restaurant way better. And I think people stay and eat way more on a subconscious level if the music fits the mood of what the restaurant is.
I never actually knew there was a person. I always thought it was just the restaurant's general manager that, say, subscribed to Spotify or Pandora and just put on a mix.
That's a lot of times that's what it is. And sometimes you can tell when that's the case because, for instance, I was at a restaurant where Jack Johnson came on and then 4 songs later, Jack Johnson came back on and I realized that they were playing the Pandora Jack Johnson.
Do you have like a pick-me-up restaurant or a pick-me-up ice cream parlor? Say life doesn't go your way, but you still want to feel good. Like, do you have that restaurant?
I'd say that restaurant for me is probably the place I go to the most. Around the corner from my apartment is a place called Robata Jinya, which is a ramen restaurant. And I love Japanese food. It's probably my favorite sort of culture food-wise. And Robata Jinya has amazing ramen and really good sushi. And it's very much like, you know, Japanese comfort food. So I think of that as like sort of my comfort food place. I don't need to be in a bad mood to go there, but it certainly doesn't hurt to make me feel better eating a big bowl of ramen and some great spicy tuna and crispy rice and being able to walk there to do it.
What kind of ramen is it? Is it like the dipping ramen? Is it
it's like a traditional tonkotsu ramen, so it's pork-based broth with chashu pork. They also have a really delicious vegan ramen, which I know seems like a misnomer, but I think they use sunflower seeds to make the broth creamy, and it's very, very good, and the noodles are really excellent too.
What about worst restaurant experiences?
Oh man, worst restaurant experiences. Yep. All right, I've got one. I was trying to think of a place that I wouldn't be like selling them out by saying it was bad, but it's closed. There's a place in Los Angeles called the Burger Kitchen that actually was next door to where Robata Jinya is now. I was invited to go there as press when they opened. I had a burger that just something didn't taste right to me. and my friend that I was with, and then both of us went home and just didn't feel well. Often that's not a restaurant's fault. People get food poisoning all the time from very good restaurants. So I just want to point out that it had nothing to do with what they had maybe done wrong in general, you know? But then the restaurant appeared on Kitchen Nightmares, the Gordon Ramsay show. And it's the only restaurant that's gotten 2 episodes of that show because it was so bad that they had to, like, literally there was so much that was wrong with it that it needed 2-hour-long episodes to go into it. And when that happened, I felt so vindicated that the meal there had been a bad meal. And it's now closed, and I wish nothing but the best to the people who were involved, and hopefully they learned their lesson. But watching the Kitchen Nightmares, sending it to my friend and saying, we weren't alone. This was, I'm glad we made it out alive. That felt like a very vindicating moment to me.
Excellent. Hey, thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jeff. Be sure to check out all of the awesomeness Jeff is doing on Facebook. You can catch him at facebook.com/JeffMillerLA, JeffMillerLA. Also, all news on his band, the Black Crystal Wolf Kids, can be found at blackcrystalwolfkids.com. For other reviews and interviews with Restaurant Fiction, be sure to check out our podcast page on iTunes and our website, www.restaurantfiction.com. My name is Monis Rose, and as always, keep it real, keep it fresh, and keep it on the flip side. Cut to
Exterior. Interior.
Restaurant?
Bar.